Welcome back to another episode of the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. Joe DeLeone and Ryan Roberts. Ryan is on the scene in Indianapolis for the 2023 NFL Combine, and we are recapping and reacting to the latest happenings at day one of the NFL Combine. A lot of crazy numbers, some pretty crazy twitchy dudes amongst these defensive tackles and edges. And then we've also got the linebackers who I don't think we had as explosive as I think we were hoping for some guys, but still some really great numbers. Ryan, how are we doing today in Indianapolis?
Good, man. Good. It was Joe. I became the first in the first media group ever to be taken into Lucas Oil Stadium to watch testing. It was
I saw some like angles of that, and that was when I texted you. I'm like, "Are you in the stadium?" I didn't know that was allowed. They changed that.
This was the first year that media has ever been allowed to come into the stadium. I know they let fans in last year. They let media and fans in this year.
Stupid.
Gotta be honest though, they didn't really love it.
Right, you're not close, so like you can't really see. Like it seemed like it was kind of far back.
And you know how lame I am, right? Like I literally brought my own stopwatch with me, so I'm sitting there just like actually timing, and you're not close enough where it's like. I mean, my time was still pretty spot on because I have a track and field coach finger. But yeah, man, it actually wasn't the best. It wasn't the best. I actually would have probably preferred to just been in the media room or been at a bar or been in my hotel room. But you know, if I'm a pioneer though, Joe. I'm a pioneer in the draft space.
Channeling your inner Charles Casserly with the stopwatch. You got the glasses vibes too.
Like this.
Yeah. Ryan, though, we got a lot that we want to get to in this grouping of guys that we're going to be recapping here. I want to start with the defensive lineman, the interior defensive lineman. We have to start by talking about Adetomiwa Adebawore, who tested with the edges, but he is very obviously going to be transitioning to the interior. Interesting that he went with the edge group, but nonetheless, he still ends up showing up with some pretty stupid numbers. 6'2", 282, 33 7/8 inch arms, so almost 34-inch arms, 4.49 on the 40, which is nuts at 282, 37.5-inch vertical, and then 10-foot 5-inch broad. I think out of anybody, and we could sit here and kind of just bring up some names for the rest. I'm not saying we're going to do it that way, but that testing for him is insane. And the way that he has progressed since the Senior Bowl, his stock's really rising. He is going to continue to climb. How
high do we think we can go, Joe? Because I mean,
late day 2, I think is realistic for him. Joe, he's pretty raw still.
I have heard, and again, this is hearsay. This is just speculation. This is just people talking, and we know that it doesn't always work out the way that we hear it. But I think there's a shot he might go in the late stages of the first round.
Really? You think after everything, he's good enough to go late first round?
Is he good enough to go late first round? No, he shouldn't go late first round. That's not the conversation piece, though. The conversation piece is that he killed the interviews this week. Killed them, dude. People love him from a media perspective, from a team perspective. I know this firsthand. People love him. Then he goes, and you look at him and say, okay, you're playing edge at Northwestern, which – you have 34-inch arms, so like you can get away with it, and you're a freak athlete, right? Like you can make that work. But he played for the first time ever, exclusively inside almost at the Senior Bowl, looked dominant all week. Then he comes this week, and he doesn't test great. He doesn't test elite. Joe, he created a new category. He was an alien this week, man. Like he was an absolute alien in testing.
Yeah.
At 282 pounds, he ran 4.49.
That's not normal.
It's not. No, there's a lot of running backs in the NFL. There's a lot of wide receivers in the NFL. There's defensive backs in the NFL that wish that they could run a 4.49. It's insane, man. I don't think people quite understand enough of like the dude's 282 pounds just ran sub 4.5. And by the way, his other testing numbers were fantastic as well. And when he benches tomorrow, I guarantee he puts up 35 plus reps. Because I walked past the dude yesterday at the media availability. My guy is a ball of muscle, brother. Like he is impressive young man.
It looks like he didn't do any of the agility drills, but I don't know if
they do those. I think those. Well, they do those at the end, and then maybe they just didn't post them yet, or maybe
No,
save them for the pro day.
there's edge numbers on here for some of the guys. So like Lucas Van Ness, we're going to get to, had a really good time in the 3-cone drill. We'll get to that. He had a 702, 702 second for 270 pounds. That's pretty good. But dude, Adetomiwa Adebawore, I honestly kind of see it, and I did a quick reaction to this, talking about how we need to realize that this is an interior guy. Yeah. This isn't an edge, and he's doing this stuff. And the problems that he caused at the Senior Bowl was something that we talked about after the Senior Bowl, that he was just really low to the ground and quick and powerful. And the length is really, really enticing. I think that a lot of people talk very highly of Kalijah Cansey, and I'm one of those people. But I think Adebawore kind of gives a lot of those similar sense, where he's so low to the ground. He is hard to contain because he is, as you said, a ball of muscle that is just very problematic. I want to dive into his film. I need a little bit more perspective on him to really properly place him, because I don't know where I'm going to fit him in this class for the defensive tackle rankings. I will say, though, late first round is a little rich for my blood.
I know it's rich based on his Northwestern film, because you've literally never seen him play interior defensive line outside of Mobile. Like, you haven't seen it. But the fact of the matter is, Joe, is that he tested in a historical level, and we see every year that NFL scouts and evaluators, they go a little bit nutty for those guys that are historical testers, right? The guys that are just like, if I'm a coach and I look at Adetomiwa, if I'm a defensive line coach, aren't I going to talk to a scout and be like, yo, brother, you get me that kid? That kid's a Pro Bowler. Like, I can make that kid that type of player. And that's where the jostling back and forth between the general manager scouting side of things and the coaching side of things, because coaches are involved in those types of things. And we know coaches are going to sit down with that kid. He's going to look at everything that he did this offseason, the intangibles and the tangible things, and he's going to say, I can bet on that kid. And that's how those types of players go in the first round. So I just would not be shocked, man. I just wouldn't be shocked if it happens.
Yeah, no, and we do always get a guy like this every single year. So it's going to be weird to see what happens with Adebawore. And I wouldn't be surprised if he just finds his way in the back end of the first round. It feels weird trying to talk about any of these other defensive tackles, because I think that there were guys that had good days. If I were to bring up one guy in particular, I want to talk about Bryan Bresee. But just to throw out some additional guys, I thought Zach Pickens looked pretty good. He ends up running a 4.89.
Zach Pickens looked great, man. He looked great.
35-inch arms, almost.
Did you see him? Did you see him in the wave drill where he had the back pedal and he had to change direction?
Yeah, man.
He looked smooth, man. I was like, oh, all right.
I will never understand why Zach Pickens isn't getting more love in this class, because he also was a sneaky good performer at the Senior Bowl that just didn't really get brought up because there were so many other good defensive linemen. So I like Zach Pickens. I thought he looked really, really clean in those drills for his size at 291. Keanu Benton, easy mover, another guy who almost 34-inch arms, 6'4", not that fast in the 40 and not that explosive. But to get to Bresee, who at 6'5", 298, runs a 4.86, which is a good number. I was mostly impressed, though. I think out of anyone doing the drills, he looked the most natural, he looked the most smooth, and he also looked the most powerful. The bag drills, he was popping the hell out of those bags, man. And like, I know they're bags.
I don't know, man. Totally from USC got that guy in that one rep really badly.
Because the guy had his head up against the bag like a
dude. Totally was like haymaker though, man. He's throwing haymakers out there.
Yeah, Bresee's a good one, though.
Bresee's a good one though, Joe. Because I mean, he's such a interesting case study because he's not a clean prospect, right? And some of it's not his fault. Actually, a lot of it's not his fault. I mean, you talk about the death of his sister, obviously, right? Like, I understand a young man missing games for that, and I understand a young man head maybe not being right for a season because of that. Like, that is a tragic thing he had to deal with. But he also dealt with the injury the year before, so he missed a lot of the 2021 season. You haven't seen a ton of Bryan Bresee over the last 2 years. You just haven't seen it. But it's easy to see when you see him in person, when you see him move around, why he was a former 5-star, why he was a former number 1 overall recruit. Like, it's very easy, man. 486 at 300 pounds, 6'5". If we didn't have the freak show of Adetomiwa and those dudes, you'd be like, Bryan Bresee's the big winner of the day for that number. Like, it's a crazy number.
I said that immediately. I did breakup reactions for each position group, and just because Adebawore tested with the edges, that kind of impacted my perspective on who was the best defensive tackle. But exactly to that point, if Ade Adebawore didn't exist, if he wasn't in this draft class, Bryan Bresee had the best day. And it just sucks that now immediately it's like, all right, now our attention's on this freak show of an athlete that is going to dominate the storyline, I think, for the next couple of months.
He moves differently for a guy his size. At 6'5 and a half, 300 pounds. He's 298. I'm going to give him 300. Didn't have the explosive numbers I thought he was going to have. Like, his broad and his vertical weren't great. But the linear explosiveness stuff as far as the 40 time. And Joe, I mean, I think that you hit it. You nailed it. You hit the nail on the head. In all the field positions parts of the workout, Bryan Bresee looked smooth, man. He looked dynamic. He looked comfortable. All those things together, man, I'm just like, yeah, you have to gamble a little bit on a Bryan Bresee, but that kid has about as much upside as anybody in this class. Like, he could be as good as he wants to be. And honestly, I don't say this a lot about 6'5", 300-pound guys. I think he could play on the edge if he wanted to. Like, he could be a Calais Campbell-esque edge rusher if you needed him to. But he could also be a dominant 3 technique at the next level.
I will also say that Bresee is one of those guys who I just don't get the over evaluation on him. And I've seen some people say that they just don't think he's that disruptive. And I don't really agree with that. Like, he's not as disruptive as Jalen Carter or, I mean, Kalijah Kancey too, because it's a different level of disruption because he's like at everybody's waist when he's coming out of his stance. But Bresee has a role, man. He's got a role. And I think that I know that we don't really love the Daron Paynes and the Jonathan Allens of the world because of them not putting up big stats. But like, they don't put a big stat. They don't put up big stats, but they serve a role. They certainly serve a role on an important role on a lot of defensive lines. Those guys are needed to create production for your edge rushers. Absolutely, you need a guy like Bryan Bresee.
And again, he's not the proven product this player was coming out, and he is not. The floor is just not as high as what Ndamukong Suh was coming out of Nebraska, because you knew what Ndamukong Suh was. He was the best player in college football, arguably, the last year he came out. But there is a lot of stylistic comparisons that I could make between Bryan Bresee and Ndamukong Suh. The length they have, the smoothness they have, the power they have. I think that there's some similarities there, man. So Bryan Bresee, I don't know exactly where he's going to get drafted. I don't. Could he go in the top 10? Sure. Could he go in the top 20? Sure. Could he fall to the end of the first round because people just don't have enough film on him? It's possible as well. I mean, all those things are possible, but I think that from a upside perspective, he has about as much upside as any interior defensive lineman in the class.
Now, speaking of upside, as we roll into this edge group, there is a lot of talent in this group, and we saw some pretty crazy athletes that had full testing days. I want to talk about Nolan Smith first because I think there's less to talk about than I think people think, because he didn't do anything because of the pectoral injury that he suffered. I will say, and I tweeted this, and I had some people respond, or I had one person respond to it and ask, well, what does the pectoral injury have anything to do with him testing? I suffered a pectoral injury in college, and I brought it up on this show a million times. The recovery timeline for that, depending on the severity of it, is a bitch. It sucks. And it actually impacts your ability to move and do a lot of things more than people actually think. So for him to show up and actually do some of the testing is a positive sign. It is a positive sign that things are going well and that he should be fine. But separate from that, dude, him running a 4.39 with a 41.5-inch vertical is pretty silly for an edge rusher. We knew that he was fast, though. Like, that's the thing, is that I'm not that shocked, because like, I knew that this was going to be a linear track athlete that, minus the injury, if we decide not to overanalyze the injury, should be good enough to go in the back end of the first round. He's that good of a player.
Did you see Nolan Smith saying that he wanted to run faster or something, or he wasn't running
He
hard?
was
I'm just like,
pissed.
no.
He threw his phone.
I was like, Nolan, dude, chill out, man. Like, chill out. Like, I get it. I
He's
understand.
competitive.
I get it. But like, come on, man. You ran 4.39, dude. You ran 4.39 at 238 pounds. Like, just chill out. Chill out, right? I mean, but at the end of the day, Joe, he is another kid that is going to be a volatile prospect because the production was never there. And then he missed the majority of this season. So you're missing a little bit of film this year. You didn't have stellar production. But again, I mean, I talked about this with Adetomiwa. He tested at a historical level. I saw Daniel Jeremiah had an interesting comp. He comped him to Hassan Reddick, which I actually kind of like. I think that's an interesting comp. I do. But Hassan Reddick was very productive, although he played at Temple versus Georgia. And we can have that conversation, right? But Nolan Smith is not a finished product. He does not have a large array of production. He was a good football player, though, for Georgia last year. He was an important football player. But I feel like now he's going to get overdrafted a little bit. Just a little bit. Because is he a guy that's going to have double-digit sack seasons every single year? I don't know if that's him. I don't know. Because he's not near a finished product. And as a kid that's a fourth-year senior, I would just like a guy to be a little bit more of a known commodity than what he is right now. So we'll see, man. Talented for sure, but I think he's going to get a little overdrafted based upon what he did today.
I don't know why, but he gives me Wink Martindale vibes.
Yes,
and this isn't me just saying this because I'm a Giants fan, but I don't know why I feel like I could see him on the Giants because of what Wink Martindale looks for with his edge rushers and his linebackers. So I could see Nolan Smith in that spot. But separate from that, though, two really good performers. We've got the two Iowa guys who looked really, really good today, who fit the two categories that everyone loves with edge rushers, with length, and with athleticism. So Lucas Van Ness from Iowa comes in at 6'5", 272, 34-inch arms, which is awesome. And then he runs the 4.58, which is very, very fast. I also highlighted that he has that 7.02 3-cone. And then in his short shuttle, he has a 4.32, which is bonkers for him coming in at 272. Will McDonald, on the other hand, was at 6'4", a lot lighter at 239, almost 35-inch arms with 34 7/8 inches, 36-inch vertical with an 11-foot broad. I don't know if he did the 11-foot broad. Yeah, it does not look like he did anything.
Because he was sick. Apparently, he wasn't even going to do the explosive stuff, but he was like, I came all this way. I'm going to do something. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah.
They both did the drills. And so I think coupling the drills with the performance, I thought both those guys were smooth. I thought that for their different body types, Will McDonald's more flexible. Van Ness, who's much bulkier, is more smooth. Both of those guys, I think, fit very different roles in the NFL, but you really saw what makes them exciting as prospects. I think Van Ness already lives up to the hype that we thought he was. Yeah. For Will McDonald, I'd argue, man, after the way that things are going for him and getting to see him outside of that weird positioning at Iowa State, he might be a mid-first round pick. Mid to late first round pick.
Joe, he should go in the first round. He should have went in the first. He should have been in the first round conversation before the Senior Bowl. He should have been in the first round conversation before the Combine. I've been talking about him all offseason, man. I've been talking about him all season. The kid has special. You know what the best thing he did today was they did the bag drill. And on that last bag, you turn and you just kind of, go, completely almost to a 180, just kind of stop it on a dime. He has the most flexible ankles I've ever watched. I've ever evaluated of a football player, man. This kid can bend under the table, and he is an incredible mover changing the direction. Will McDonald is a special outside track athlete. I think that he's a tremendous athlete overall. And I was bummed that he wasn't able to do the rest because usually 36-inch vertical jump, 11-foot broad, that tells me that Will McDonald was probably going to run a stupid 40 time, man. That explosiveness translates. It does translate. So I think he probably would have ran somewhere in the 4.5s at his size with those types of numbers. He could have been an even bigger winner than he is, but than he was today. But regardless, man, I really think that he has a chance to go in the first round. I do. Van Ness is an interesting cat, though, Joe, because he's got people talked about it too much, and they've had him all week. never started a game at Iowa, and Hercules. He has his 8-pack, and like, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's all cool. He played hockey.
Different.
Yeah, like all these weird backstory stuff. But I mean, you mentioned it, man. There's special traits here, but it was different special traits than I thought I was going to see, because on film, Lucas Van Ness is playing on the edge a ton, obviously at Iowa, but he's also playing 3-tech a lot. He's moving inside and out. And I expected, based upon his film, for him to be a really explosive linear player, which he was in the 40, but his vertical wasn't great. His broad jump wasn't great. Neither of those numbers were fantastic, but then he goes there, man, and he shows that maybe he has more bend than he's going to get credit for, because maybe that's just not how he was used at Iowa. I mean, a 702 3-cone for a 272-pound dude, that's incredible, man. Like, that's a fantastic number.
And you saw that in the drills, though. Like, that's the thing where, and I feel like not enough people are talking about Van Ness after the way that he performed. And again, we're all caught up in Adetomiwa, so we're done talking about Adetomiwa on this podcast. We're done. Never again. We're never talking about him again. Obviously, we're still going to talk about him, but for the rest of the show. But Van Ness, you saw that change of direction. You saw that transition ability, and another guy kind of like Bresee, where hitting those bags, man, he was getting after it. He was moving so well. I haven't given a final grade to Van Ness just yet, but dude, I see why other people are mocking him as a top 10 pick. It all really comes to fruition here, how freaking scary this edge class is, dude. We just saw Will Anderson finish up. We just saw Derek Hall do pretty well. Those are just guys.
Derek Hall did really well, man. He ran the 4.5s. Like,
this class front to back has so much depth and also top end talent. Every team that needs just a little bit of edge help needs to draft guys day 2 at the very least. Just draft whoever you can touch. There is so much freaking talent.
Even like a Byron Young from Tennessee, who I think is a day 3 football player because he's already 25 or 26. Like, he's an older player. He ran the 4.4s, man. Like, what are we doing, dude? This stuff is nutty, man. I mean, Joe, we're really getting into a territory now where, you know, I've been scouting now for, you know, maybe 10 years. Like, I mean, at a decently serious level. And just the improvements and the steps that these athletes are taking from just 5 years ago. We're getting into the realm of ungodly numbers, man. We were literally watching linebackers run, Joe, and like, wow, he only ran 4.5 something. He didn't run that well. Like, no, he ran really well. He ran 4.5 something. It's just now we're seeing guys run 4.39, like Owen Papo. Like, it's just wild, man. It's wild.
One thing I will say, though, that did become noticeable, that like I thought that I had watching, is that the difference in athleticism, just overall in each position group, from edge to linebacker, despite the linebackers being smaller than the edges, is kind of funny to realize that like there's all these freaky athletes that are running all these crazy times. And then you get the linebacker. Yes, you have the Trenton Simpsons and the Owen Papos, but after that, it's kind of like a slower group. The group is not as fast as the edge rushers, which is just funny to me that their roles are different, and you kind of would want more speed at linebacker, but it's not necessarily the case as we're seeing here at the combine. We just see where speed goes. It goes right to edge. It doesn't even go to safety sometimes these days. It goes right to corner and edge these days. There's less of a focus, I think, on linebacker and safety sometimes.
I mean, can I put that into context for you, Joe? I just literally wrote an article about Isaiah Foskey, and he was another really, 264 pounds. He ran 4.58, right? Like, he was flying and good vertical, good broad. But he ran a faster 40-yard dash than what Kyle Hamilton ran coming out last year, and he played safety.
Yeah.
It's what?
That's goofy.
And Kyle Hamilton went 14th overall, should have went higher, and was fantastic as a rookie. And we just had a defensive end at the same school at Notre Dame come in and run a faster 40 time, despite being almost 50 pounds heavier. What are we doing, man? These defensive ends nowadays are just, it's unreal, man. It's unreal.
No, it definitely is. But to get to the linebackers, though, Ryan, to round us out here, again, it is pretty just crazy, and I'm excited to see how these guys do. But to get to these linebackers, they just finished up. Trenton Simpson, who came in at 6'2", 235 pounds. He runs a 4.43. doesn't do any of the other testing. I was a big fan of the way that he looked in a lot of these drills. Owen Papo is the big one that I think everyone's going to be talking about. Him at 6 foot 225 on the lighter side. He runs a 4.39 with a 35-inch vertical, a 10 foot 6-inch broad. Jack Campbell had a very well-rounded day. Not the fastest player, but for his size, he is somebody who I think is a very smooth player. 6'5", 249 with 31-inch arms, 31 7/8-inch arms, 4.65 in the 40. 37.5-inch vertical, and then a 10.8 broad. I think a lot of people would say that Jack Campbell was the most well-rounded. The way that I kind of saw this, Ryan, is that Papo was the best athlete. I thought Trenton Simpson had the best overall day of athleticism and performance in the drills. And then Jack Campbell, I think, had the most balanced overall day of every single testing thing that he did. He tested strong for his size profile and then backed it up by showing what he can do on the field with the linebacker drills.
Yeah, no, it was very. Owen Papo's a weird player, man. He's a weird player. I mean, because
very erratic is the way I would put it.
You knew he was going to run fast because he's a freak show. I mean, he was another former 5-star, right? But you watch his film, and it's just like someone made this comparison to a different player today, and I really thought it was funny, Joe. They said that it was like he's like a dog with a laser pointer at times, where it's just like chase that red dot, chase it around, like go find it, and it's just so spot on to Owen Papo. But I mean, again, man, we're getting into territories where Trenton Simpson at 4.43 is an insane time. But we set our expectations so high coming in. It's like, oh, Trenton Simpson might run a 4.38. He might do it, right?
Yeah, I was hoping he would.
I was really hoping he would because I picked him in the RAS battle, and I definitely won that one. Definitely won that one.
No, Sewell, man. He came in too light. He came in all thin, and then he runs a slow time, which is.
What did he run? What did Sewell run?
I just had it pulled up. Wait,
I know it was like a 4.72 unofficial, but I didn't know if it was faster. Yeah.
I literally just had it pulled up, man. I
told you he was going to come in lighter though, Joe. It was only 246, man.
But the annoying thing is he's 246 and he runs a 464, which is just annoying.
That's not bad at all, man. That's not bad.
I think if he was 250, I think he would have ran a similar time. If he was like 255, then I would have won the RAS thing. But I digress. Continue your point.
No, I mean, that was the point, man, is that we're getting into the conversation now where like 4.4 athlete at linebacker is the standard, right? Like every team is trying to find, although Devin Bush hasn't worked out, but they're trying to find their Devin Whites. They're trying to find their Micah Parsons. They're trying to find their Trenton Simpsons. Like they're trying to find those types of cats. And I feel like we saw a linebacker, I think, was pretty well balanced. Like there weren't a lot of testers that were just like, awful time. But it wasn't like, it wasn't what we saw in the edge group. It wasn't what we saw in the defensive line group in general. I agree with that. But I saw everything I needed to see out of Trenton Simpson, man. I mean, that kid's a gifted athlete. He's explosive. Thought he looked very good. Owen Papo, I actually think, is a little bit tight as an athlete. Like, I don't think he changes direction incredibly well, but like the straight line explosiveness is nutty, man. Like, it's really nutty. You know who was an underrated player in the field drills portion of it, Joe, that I didn't necessarily think tested as well as I thought? Jeremy Banks from Tennessee looked smooth in the field drills, man. Smooth. But he ran like 4.7 in the 40. I'm just like, wow, really? I didn't expect that one. But he looked really good in the field position, in my opinion.
Jeremiah kept bringing him up during the field drills. I thought he looked good. I wouldn't really put him on my riser list, but like I thought that like he caught my attention. You know who I have to bring up that didn't test but looked so freaking good in the drills? He's my favorite player. It might be my favorite player in this class, Ryan. You know who that is. You know who I'm going to talk about. The guy that you clowned on me for liking. You know who I'm talking about.
Oh, Ivan Pace?
No, not Ivan Pace. Did he even test?
I don't know, dude. Did he?
I don't think he did.
If he didn't test, that is a huge red flag, man.
Ivan Pace isn't my boy. My boy's Drew Sanders, man. He is freaking.
Dude, why didn't Drew Sanders run though? What's he hiding?
They said something about like a hamstring tweak, and then he intended to participate in all the drills, but he couldn't run. He still runs, or he still does all the drills. Here's what he ends up with his testing or his measurables. At 6'4", 235, 32 1/8 inch arms.
Yep.
I saw in the
Actually,
drills
shorter
though,
arms than I thought he was going to have, to be honest.
yeah, I was thinking for like a former
33
edge.
plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But dude, Drew Sanders, man, for 6'4", how freaking massive this guy is. He looks so fluid. And I know, like, he didn't change direction as well as some of the other smaller guys. But I think up there with Jack Campbell for these bulkier linebackers, these
Yeah.
more hulking presences, I thought he shined. Like he
They're high,
looked
they're
almost
high
as
cut.
good as a very high cut.
Yeah.
But I think that
Yeah.
he looked not the same, but close to some of these smaller guys. I
Yeah.
think that Drew Sanders, man, is somebody who deserves the attention. And I don't want to overthink him. He's long, he's athletic, he moves really freaking well. He moves so easily. I think he's going to be annoying. I think he's going to be such a monster and a nuisance for opposing offenses.
I still have a tough time with where he's going to play, though, man. I do. Joe, we talked about this. His film grew on me, right? There was a couple games where I was like, okay, I like that a lot more.
You trusted me.
Other but I mean, Joe, I still don't know what position I want to play him at. I'm still not 100% sure. I mean, he's a Sam linebacker, and that's a dying breed. I mean, that just isn't a very.
You don't think you could play him at will? I don't know if I'd put him at Mike. Mike feels weird putting him at Mike.
I don't like putting guys at will that I struggle with the change direction stuff, man. Like, I don't know. Like, he's high-legged. I don't know if he's going to change direction incredibly well all the time. You know? Like, that's... Usually wills are usually your sawed-off guy. Usually they're like 6'1", 230, and can run. You know what I mean? Like, 6'4" plus guys, they're usually Mikes or Sams. Like, they're not usually wills.
I just think that... But to your point, though, on him, is exactly what you're saying, is that he's a taller, high-cut guy, and he moves really well, so he should play Sam. But as you're saying, that's a dying breed. But then Mikes are a little bit more slower and bulkier, which is what Jack Campbell is. Like, Jack Campbell is going to step right in, and he's going to be a Mike at the next level, and he's going to be a very good Mike.
Yeah.
I think it's a total misuse and pigeonhole of Drew Sanders. The reason why I throw out Sam or Will is that you can at least give him a little bit more range. I understand what you're talking about. I mean, could he play like a Jeremy Chin, Isaiah Simmons type role where
I actually think that's the best role for him, if that's the Jeremy Chin role, that being. But
what the hell do we even call that?
It's a Sam linebacker. I mean, that's what it is. It's just
right.
He just moves
hybrid
around a
Sam?
lot.
Is that how we want to phrase it? Hybrid Sam?
Joe, I mean, honestly, if this was the early 2000s, I would draft Drew Sanders all day in the first round because I'd be like, that's your starting Sam linebacker, and he'd come on the line of scrimmage a ton too if you wanted to, right? Like, that's that position. It's just in 2023, that position barely is on the field anymore, man. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier that told me that the Cleveland Browns were in base defense or in sub-package defense 75% of the time last year, man. Sam linebackers just don't matter as much. They just don't matter.
I think that you can find a role for a kid like this, though, and I know that's wishful thinking.
Look, he's a talented kid, and I think he'll find a role. I just personally am just having a little bit of a hard time 100% understanding what that role is. I'm not saying he doesn't have one. I'm just looking at him. I'm just like, I don't know what I would 100% do with him. But again, defensive coordinators have different tastes, different schemes, different opinions of how to utilize players differently. Like if he goes to a Dallas Cowboy-esque philosophy where they're like, you're going to be Mike on first and second down, but then we're going to move you all around like a Micah Parsons does, right? I mean, yes, that could work. I just don't know, man. I just don't know.
Some old man is going to draft him and put him at Mike linebacker, and the dream will be dead, and I will cry myself to sleep over Drew Sanders. Ryan, that's a good note to wrap us up on. We've got day 2. We've got day 3. We've got day 4. We've got more NFL Combine coverage coming your way. Make sure you subscribe and you don't miss out. At Joe DeLeone, at Rise and Draft. Also, make sure you go to Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code HACK. Ryan, we got to talk more about that, by the way. You have your own promo code. We're going to figure all that out. We'll be back with more. Enjoy the rest of your week, folks. Before we continue on with this video, I just want to tell you folks about an exciting new partnership that we have with this channel with Underdog Fantasy. Ever since I joined, I've been having so much fun. There are so many different exciting games that make watching games during the offseason more exciting. I'm not the biggest basketball fan, but it has made it way more entertaining since I found Underdog Fantasy. And my favorite game to play so far, which I think you should try out, is Pick'em. It is so easy to play. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite player stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your pick'em slip, get every pick right, and take home some cold hard cash. Use code HACK, H-A-C-K, HACK, like the name of this channel. Use code HACK to get your first deposit doubled up to $100 by Underdog. Go sign up. You won't regret it. You're going to have a blast. Check out Underdog Fantasy. I also want to tell you folks about our other recurring sponsor that we have on this channel, that being BetOnline, betonline.ag, which has all the updated odds, news, and anything for sports betting. It's my go-to source for when I want to be betting specifically on games. I love betting on college basketball or the NBA, especially, again, during the offseason. Always looking for more fun ways to be focused in on some of these other sports. It's betonline.ag and use promo code BELIEVE50. It's promo code BELIEVE50 to get 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts.